Last year, the film The Act of Killing went on national release in the UK. A new documentary about the perpetrators of the Indonesian genocide of the 1960s. The film tells a story of horrific and unspeakable crimes against humanity. Following the Indonesian military coup of 1965, paramilitaries and gangs of thugs helped the army to massacre more than 1 million alleged communists in less than a year.
Beginilah caranya supaya jangan darah itu terlalu banyak.
To this day, Indonesian officials refuse to recognize the crimes. The film has united critics and the public in praise and won numerous awards around the world. But what few people know is that the film was based on academic research and was funded by a grant from the Arts and Humanities Research Council. I'm Philip Pothen, and I went to a screening of The Act of Killing in Berlin to meet the director Joshua Oppenheimer to ask what were the research questions that drove him to make this extraordinary and important film. Huge congratulations on what is an astonishing and really important film. Talk us through how the project started, really.
Really, we could never have made this film without the Arts and Humanities Research Council saying these are really important research questions, and this is an important innovation in film form and film language and film production, and this is worth taking a chance on. I was working in London with a little film collective called Vision Machine. We had this extraordinary footage of perpetrators boasting, taking me to the places where they killed, like Anwar does in that first scene on the roof, showing us how he killed. That work was the basis for my PhD, which was at the University of the Arts, so I was eligible to be the main researcher in the project. And after so much work, they said, okay, we're going to fund the project for a year. And they gave the equivalent of 1 year's support for a postdoctoral salary for me, and 1 year's worth of production funding. And with that, we were able to shoot a significant amount of the film. As we were making the application, I continued going to Indonesia to do the film work, and found that the army in the city had recruited its killers from the ranks of these movie theater gangsters who loved American movies and claimed to be killing in ways inspired by American movies. So the research questions evolved. We refined the research questions further, submitted again, and that then gave us really the resources for me to work full-time on the film for 3 more years. So I had 4 years of full-time work on the film. Once there was this material, the film funders who had said no to the film when we said, look, here's perpetrators who've been in power ever since, who are boastful about what they've done. They want to dramatize what they've done. We think we should let them, and we should even facilitate it to show the nature of the regime they've built and how they want to be seen and how they really see themselves, and to really expose this impunity. Those film funders who had said no to that because it sounded simply too crazy, when they saw the material we were able to shoot with the AHRC grant, then they came on board.
Mungkin ya banyak hantunya, karena di sini tuh banyak manusia yang dihabisi, yang mati nggak wajar lah sih. Yang mati yang tidak wajar. Datang sini sehat. Sampai di sini dipukul mati.
So we then filmed every perpetrator we could find, working our way from plantation to plantation, from death squad to death squad, across the region, up the chain of command, from the countryside to the city of Medan and beyond, to retired army generals living in Jakarta. And everyone was boastful, and all of the executioners would take us to the places where they killed, like Anwar does in the roof at the beginning, offer to launch into these spontaneous kind of demonstrations of how they killed.
Kalau dulu kita main pukul, pertama itu datang kita main pukul, itu kan darah banyak. Di sini kan darah banyak ini kan. Jadi karena terlalu banyak darah itu kan bersihnya kan bau, ya kan. Jadi cara untuk jangan keluar darah itu inilah pakai sistem ini. Ya, saya peragakan boleh kan? Boleh ya. Ya, itu duduk aja sini lah. Mereng lah sana nanti. Ini. Perasaannya mesti diperagakan.
For me, filmmaking is a method of investigation. Re-articulate the questions in cinematic terms and answer them in cinematic terms. what kind of filmmaking method could we develop that would make the stories they tell themselves to cope with what they've done visible? The perpetrators were not giving testimony. There was no sober effort to try and remember, such as you see from perpetrators who've already been removed from power and who are sort of forced to testify. It was like performance, what we were getting. The question was, for whom are they performing? Why are they performing? You know, what was the relationship between their love of cinema and the killings? How was cinema implicated in the killings? And it's much more complicated and much more interesting, I think, than simply, you know, movie violence begets real-world violence. Cinematic fantasy as a way of distancing yourself from the act of killing. The first perpetrators I filmed were drinking to distance themselves from it. Anwar and his friends were watching movies.
There's one point when he says we've got to reenact this properly. And there are moments for the viewer when some of the enactments become very real and a little bit terrifying.
Yeah, I think because there's real trauma that's coming up either in Anwar's eyes, you know, when the village is being burnt, I think, for example, when there's a woman who looks like she's fainted. In fact, she's not fainted. An Indonesian viewer, all Indonesian viewers recognize her as kesurupan, which means possessed. There's real pain that bubbles up, and I think viewers feel implicated in it, because also Plato describes in the Republic both our guilt and shame when we see violence, but nevertheless how irresistible it is. And I think that I think we viewers feel implicated. What are we doing when we watch violence? Why do we watch violence? We're the only species that enjoys watching each other get hurt, I think. You know, when children get beaten up on the playground and everybody screams, fight, fight, fight. Whatever's happening there, it may be something we grow out of, but that enjoyment is very elemental and very frightening and very profound, I think.
Kalau saya melihat ya, kalau sukses kita bikin ini film, menyatakan bahwa film G30 SPKI yang dulu, PKI kejam, tidak kejam. Yang kejam tuh kita.
There's whispers about nominations for BAFTAs and Academy Awards. How do you feel about that? I mean, you've already won so many awards.
I think it's wonderful in two ways. When a film is different and has been made in a fundamentally different way and actually breaks through and gets mainstream acceptance, that opens a space for more adventurous, more intelligent, more experimental work. It opens a way for filmmakers to stand on the shoulders of the act of killing and to try new things. It opens a space for further innovation. The act of killing hasn't been ghettoized as an experimental film or an activist film or an academic project, and that's so important. The awards are a sign of the willingness of audiences to say, this is about all of us. This is not a case study of the depths of depravity that human beings are capable of on the other side of the world. This is the underbelly of our reality. This is a mirror held up to all human beings about the nature of impunity, about how we live with guilt, about how we create our world through storytelling.
I think it's one of the most amazing documentaries I've ever seen.
Moved me in a very deep way. It was very hard to take, but not for the reasons that I expected.
Hopefully this film is helping to make peace with the past, that in the future nothing like that will happen again.
The monster under the floorboards was out, and everyone was talking about it, and it was okay to suddenly talk about it. And that's really what the film has done. It's come to Indonesia like the child in the emperor's new clothes. It's come and created a space where Indonesians can talk about the most vexing problems that their society faces for the first time without fear. And from there, within this space, they can start to articulate demands for a truth commission, for a reconciliation process, and the other problems that stem from having such an exploitative regime in place for so long.